James, when was the last time someone told you that you looked like an NFL running back?
It was about a day ago, and if I had a nickel for every time someone told me I look like an NFL running back, I would have two nickels. But it's weird that I have two nickels. Um,
Currently, I have 15 cents, which is I have three nickels, which is very weird.
and the fact that both of us have now been compared to yours truly, Cam Scatavo, um, on separate videos, not even in relation. Maybe people two, three different, or I guess for you, total now would be five
Right?
individual people have come together and been like, "This is Cam Scatavo speaking. Who knew he could be so elegant and coherent in his talk and language?" I'm like, "Wow,
He's
here
so
we are."
articulate that Arizona State education is going to good use.
Who knew he liked Tribe Called Quest?
Exactly. I know Scadaboo said he was going to do 23 and Me, but he believes that he's Norwegian and Portuguese, which makes a certain amount of sense. We
Hey,
have that kind of somewhere over the Mediterranean look.
Port Portuguese did a lot of exploring in the global south, so that could explain some things.
Scadaboo from Brazil.
Right.
So, with that, welcome to the 434 Defense Podcast with Cam Scadaboo 2 and Cam Scadaboo 3. Now, I'm your host, Deuce Prince. My brother James Prince is on the pod. We are both lifelong UVA fans, Charlottesville, Virginia natives, and former football players ourselves. And we have an awesome episode coming up talking all about Virginia's upcoming game with the Washington State Cougars. James, tell me about the Washington State Cougars?
I think when you look at Washington State just on paper, it is a very conflicting message and very conflicting story. They opened up the year with a 3-point win over Idaho, who now only has like one win against a scholarship team in the FCS.
Yes.
They lost by 49 to North Texas and lost the Apple Cup to Washington. But they've won against their, or not won against former, but the other Mountain West teams that they face in South San Diego State and Colorado State, and then just recently played number five Old Miss and only lost by three in Oxford. It's a team that I think for a lot of fans of West Coast football, it's something that the last 2 weeks or last two games has been very encouraging. And I think it's something, when Washington State's on a roll, we all know about the legend of Mike Leach and what he did for Washington State. It's something that they're kind of maybe hopeful that this can be a turning point. And with a team, when you go back weeks against Old Miss and now UVA, who's now a ranked program, these are going to be two very daunting tasks for the Washington State Cougars.
For schools that are basically right next door to each other, Pullman, Washington, which is host to Washington State University, and Moscow, Idaho, which is home to the Idaho Vandals, these two have played very similar schedules in that they've both kind of played a schedule from hell. Idaho, which has now dropped down to FCS and is a member of the Big Sky Conference, one of the best FCS conferences. They've played two FCS opponents, Montana and St. Thomas, the non-scholarship juggernaut, and they're
Yeah.
like 2-4 and still ranked 24th in FCS.
Who would have thought that the name recognition of Idaho would get you would carry far? But people don't know about the FCS ball, man. The Idaho name strikes fear in the hearts of many.
Jason Eck, a great coach over there at Idaho, and Washington State, who is now going to play their second ranked team in a row. Now, the number 18 Virginia Cavaliers, we moved up one spot during the bye week. And Washington State, there are games that you can really get up for because you dislike the opponent. For Virginia's sake, it would be like Virginia Tech or North Carolina or Duke. This is a program that I cannot find a hateful bone in my body for. Like you were saying, I love Washington State football. I'm a big Gardner Minshew fan, and not like you said, James, I'm a big Mike Leach fan. Us growing up in Kansas for a certain amount of time, we watched a lot of Mike Leach Texas Tech football, and for a 7, 8 year old kid, that is like seeing the future.
Yeah,
And
Washington State is always a team that like when you were playing NCAA 10 or 11, and you've kind of just run through your standard dynasties of your favorite teams or some of the other people, and maybe you're from the Midwest or East Coast, and you can, okay, let me do something different. And you look
Yeah.
at that Washington State team, and back obviously when it was the Pac-10 and Pac-12, you look at that Washington State team, you look at the cool uniforms that they had back then, and the cool stadium, and on campus and everything like that. And it was something that you kind of, like you said, it's hard to hate Washington State. And I think Washington State and UVA surprisingly have a lot in common, and just in terms of their history in their landscape in college football. So, really very interesting matchup that you obviously won't see every single year with these two programs facing up.
This is very rare. This is one where did Carla Williams and the Washington State AD end up at the same conference? Is it for some kind of niche Olympic sport that only UVA and Washington State sponsor, and they just schemed up a home and home with it? But I mean, really fun non-conference action because this Washington State team is very good. I watched pretty much every snap on offense and defense for Ole Miss versus Washington State. And before we dive into the X's and O's, this is something that's no surprise to anyone that's kept up with college game day, but Washington State travels.
Oh yeah.
The Crimson is at every single college game day, the big crimson flag, and then the actual people wearing crimson and gray shirts are at any Wazoo away game. Like the Ole Miss game, obviously Lane Kiffin came out after the game and was a little bit disappointed with the Ole Miss attendance during the game because the Washington State fans were a legitimate factor in the game, which you wouldn't expect.
And honestly, like I think one of the negatives that UVA, a perception of them is that they don't have great attendance.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's just, it coincides with a lot of disappointing seasons. So, you have whenever like UVA is playing Virginia Tech or UNC, you'll see a lot of different colors in the stands at Scott Stadium. This, I would imagine, would be no different. We would hope that people in Charlottesville and people traveling all over the Virginia will come down and support the Hoos. But like you said, there will definitely be a lot of Washington State people in Virginia, and it should be a very interesting crowd to see.
I cannot emphasize it enough. Pack Scott Stadium. I was seeing some encouraging data from looking at the tickets for this game. There were not a lot of open tickets available.
Good.
That could very well be Washington State fans buying in, but hopefully we can keep the Crimson corner to that kind of southeast corner of the field, and then everything else will be a nice orange and blue. We need the fourth side, which I was talking about on TikTok today, explaining to people what the fourth side is. We need the fourth side out in action for a game on the illustrious CW network, the ACC on CW at its peak.
You know, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the CW network. Hey, can you turn on the CW network at 6:30 p.m. is usually a sentence most people don't say,
Right.
especially when shows like Arrow and some of those other stuff isn't on anymore. But that's the world we live in, especially with ACC ball. You've kind of people get used to watching some of these quirky channels that some of these games are on. And for Washington State people, I would imagine that the times and the channels that they're on are no different with the Pac-12 after dark history.
Yep.
And so, for them, it's probably just, hey, great, 3:30 game for us, or what is it? Yeah, 3:30 game. So back in Pullman, like you were saying. So definitely something we'll have to make sure keep an eye out for on the CW.
To the CW people, our lines are open. If you want
Okay,
to do a CW game day, we are game
do it.
for CW game
Why
day.
not? Why not? Let's do it.
But,
I'm all in.
X's and O's wise on Washington State, Washington State is a program that for a long time has been on the cutting edge of things offensively. As you remember, Ryan Leaf was a quarterback at Washington State, very innovative in that pro style Dennis Erickson scheme that he instituted there. Uh, you know, with Mike Leach, obviously with the air raid and Gardner Minshew, and a lot of the quarterbacks they have there. This Washington State team is very RPO and screen heavy. So they're
Yeah.
not at the bleeding edge right now, but they're very much still with the times on offense. I saw them get a lot of really decent chunk plays through short passes. One thing I couldn't see was them getting a lot of kind of what I called meat and potatoes run plays, the ones that go for 5 yards and put you in a good spot. They had some explosive runs, but I wasn't able to see a lot of the plays that make a running game sustainable.
They're not like heavy yardage. They're not gonna, in a shootout, that's not the team that Washington State is. They're 120th in FBS in overall yards per game at 313, 86 rushing yards a game, 226 passing yards a game. So this is a team, like you're saying, has to rely on the short RPOs, the screens, the swing outs, those plays to get those cheeky yards that they can get through and just, keep turning the ball, not
Hmm.
looking for the deep shots, kind of just lull the defense asleep. And then when they get their chance to strike, and then have the defense just kind of bend, don't break type of attitude.
Right. And as you know, as a former offensive lineman, when you're running that type of game, it can be very annoying for defensive linemen. One of
Yeah, because
Virginia's strength has been the edge rush and getting to the quarterback, but when the quarterback is taking a one step and dishing it out, it can get frustrating. And so the defensive line is going to have to stay very disciplined in their gaps and in their assignments and not get frustrated that the quarterback's releasing the ball too early.
and when you have those long drives for defenses, they obviously like a team like UVA, just when you have so much depth on a team, you have a lot of guys rotating in and out. So it's going to be big on those guys who are in that second, third shifts that they're going to have to make sure that they stay on their P's and Q's. Because Washington, they're just going to keep on doing their thing. They're not going to deviate from what works for them. And it's up every guy from the front of the line all the way to the back to make sure that they do their assignments and force those early three and outs and make sure that they get Washington's offense off the field.
Absolutely. This is a team that I don't think is ever going to dominate the time of possession in a game, but they can be very frustrating on the offensive side of the ball for Virginia. One thing I noticed was that this Washington State team was very good at preventing Ole Miss from throwing the deep ball. And Ole Miss obviously thrives on that Lane Kiffin offense, which is very explosive in the passing game. And you could see a definite sense of frustration on the Ole Miss offense that they weren't able to hit over the top. And with a gunslinger like we have in Chandler Morris, you know, it is no risk it, no biscuit sometimes. And so I was encouraged by the Louisville game from Chandler Morrison, knowing that he can accept not necessarily always having the 50-yard bomb available. One thing I do think we'll be able to do a lot better as opposed to the Louisville game is I think we're going to be able to run the ball a lot better.
Yeah.
Getting our offensive line back and healthy. We have four guys that got significant playing time throughout this year, last year, coming back from injury throughout this bye week. Mikhail Boley, Brady Wilson. We got a bunch of guys coming back, and I think that ought to help our running back stable a lot because I think we have three RB1s.
Hmm.
Harrison Whaley, Xavier Brown, and Jamari Taylor can all take over the game at various different points. We obviously saw Jamari Taylor take over the game against Florida State, and we've seen Harrison Whaley and Xavier Brown take over games at various different points. So I think offensively, we'll be able to control the time of possession very, very well.
Yeah. Washington State, they do a lot of, two high safeties, quarters coverage. They're trying to keep everything in front. So they only allow 190 yards of passing per game.
Hmm.
But they're giving up 156 rushing yards, which is actually 92nd in all of FBS. So, like you're saying, the run game for UVA has to be able just to take over and hit those big runs, get at least, like 250. Each guy's going to have to get, 10 to 15 carries. I would expect UVA to try to use Chandler Morris's running ability to kind of keep the defense honest and
Yes.
not just have them play that running back handoff every single time and make those safeties have to come down. And then, when it's, 5, 6 plays deep into the drive and Washington State maybe goes cover one or they go cover zero, then let Chandler Morris do what he does best and be able to throw those deep balls.
Absolutely. And being an offensive lineman yourself and having played for five seasons, tell me about a time the situations like Virginia has had where you have a bunch of guys coming back into the starting lineup. Obviously, any offensive line is going to deal with injuries at any point. What are some of the things that an offensive line has to be very mindful of as guys are getting brought back into the fold and playing for the first time in a lot of cases in like 4 weeks?
Well, I think everybody just has to stay ready. Everybody that dresses for the game, if you have your shoulder pads and helmets on, you have to be ready to go back in because you never know what could happen.
Mm,
Obviously, we don't know during the practice week the guys who are going to be starting how many reps they got during the week. There'd be a lot of situations when I was playing, whether it was at Delaware, Indiana State, or Howard, where some of the older veteran guys that you have, they may be starting on Saturday, but they maybe only got you know 10 to 15 reps in practice just because they're limited in their injuries and they don't want to risk anything during the game.
sure,
And so
right.
for the guys who are maybe, twos or threes, they may have to step up when that time comes during the game. Maybe when the coaches or the medical team's like, hey, we got to pull him back a little bit. We don't want to risk anything further.
Yeah.
And everybody has to be locked in on the assignment. Like we were playing Jacksonville State, and it was my first year at Delaware during the playoffs. And our starting center, it was a really hot day. It was, I think, 90 degrees, whatever, and we just come out of the spring season, so none of us were getting used to the Alabama heat down there. And we had guys cramping up, and I had to get in that second half and be ready to go. We had other guys at guard and tackle rotating in and just making sure guys were just staying fresh. So it's the things that when you're practicing the week. If everybody practices like they're expecting to play the game and they go out there and they know what they're doing, they know what to expect from the defense, then UVA shouldn't have to worry about that, and the offense line should be able to take care of business.
And one thing that this bye week I think is going to help a lot in, and you can probably speak to this as well, when you practice with a unit, say you're with the twos or you're with the ones, there are a lot of things that sometimes go unspoken on a certain play. I think that a lot of people might not know that during training camp, you do call out, hey, myself and the right guard are going to block this guy for the sake of the drill. But once the season starts, when you've been playing against with a guy for 2 years or 3 years in some cases, you don't need to tell your guy that. And
Yeah,
so I think this should help because we've seen a lot of different configurations. And so I think we should be protected from some of the missed assignments that typically come when you insert a new offensive lineman into a starting five, especially if you have a starting five that is played together unbroken for at least half of a football season.
I think especially being an offensive lineman, trust is such an important thing, and I think people really don't understand how much preparation goes into the game week and understanding like, hey, if you've been drilling all week that we know when the nose line is up heavy on the center, he's probably crossing face, and if he's crossing face, either the three tech's looping around or they're bringing somebody from the edge or somebody from the second level.
Mm-hmm.
If you are with a guy that you've been playing with, since August, and you guys have gotten the reps every single day together, whether it's on the Crowder, whether it's 2-on-1s on pods or in the game in practice, you can just look at him and okay, he's got that. I don't have to worry about it. But if, maybe if it's different configurations, and if you just have that thought in the back of your mind, like, I hope he knows, or
Yeah.
does he know? Like the meme, like
Say you've got
if
a true freshman or a
true
redshirt
freshman,
freshman all of a
right?
sudden in.
Yeah, and he's just excited to be in the game, and he's just super pumped up. And then he flinches on two on the snap count, or he just is so excited he just runs straight to the backer and misses the first level block. It's those type of things that you just have to go on the Friday nights, Saturday mornings when you're in the hotel, you're just doing the walkthroughs. Hey, this is what we called out for during the week. Make sure that everybody knows it, so that way when it's in the game it's not a surprise and there's no shock, there's no confusion, and everybody can just trust and they can just play with that full aggression. Because when you have that trust and you're not worrying about the guy next to you, then you can play full speed, and then that's when the offensive line can be successful.
Absolutely. And those Fridays and those Saturday mornings are so important. And it's something that's kind of a universal experience across football and especially the offensive line. A lot of people might not know there are separate game plans for every single game, and it's a big packet of paper that includes the opponent's personnel, what they like to line up in, how they line up situationally. And if you have been with a group since August, that's pretty easy to kind of understand because you have the whole playbook that you work with in camp, and then you pare down each week and you include and not include plays as the week goes on. But it's very likely with an even front and kind of a different look that Washington State provides they might be running plays that they haven't run since August.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where you just have to know, like, especially the senior leaders on this offensive line and whoever's playing center this week, the communication during the game, whether it's, hey, if we don't like this look and we just have to call it off, whether it's, Zorro where everybody just takes the gap or, we're gap call like on down blocks, we're just taking the gap, not worrying about the combos. Those communication parts are so vital. And that's where you see a lot of those MAs where you're just like, I thought you were going here. Well, I'm going here. Like all that type of miscommunication is so critical going into the game week.
Absolutely. And speaking of trust, it doesn't just apply to the offensive line. And one thing that I noticed with this team that I haven't noticed with Virginia teams under Tony Elliott for the past 3 years is the trust extends beyond that group. You can tell that Chandler Morris trusts the offensive line to protect him. You can tell that Des Kitchings, the offensive coordinator, which going into this year was a very maligned figure, he has a significant amount of trust in not only Chandler Morris but this entire offensive line to take care of business, to go out and execute on plays. And you can tell that Tony Elliott, who credit to him has stuck by Des Kitchings this entire time, is very trusting of the offense to stick to the game plan, to not let the situation get too big. And it's been one of the most encouraging things because it's something that you and I grew up watching when it came to Cavalier football. Coach Groh could trust Matt Schaub and could trust our dad or Bill Lazor to run the game plan so that the defense could take care of business. And even though Chandler Morris is a new type of quarterback and it's a new type of scheme, the mentality of this Virginia team is a bit of a throwback, which I like.
Absolutely. And I think it's just good just because of the fact that we see with this UVA team, obviously this is, Tony Elliott's years where a lot of the guys that are now seniors are people that he was recruiting or people that have been brought in the program to be leaders on this team.
Yeah,
And when you've had a coach who's now into this, part of his, coaching tenure at UVA, everybody knows what the standard is. Everybody knows what the expectations are. There's no, well, back when this coach was here, we did it this way, or at this school, we did it that way. Everybody's bought in. We're October 15th. We're in the swing of things. There should be no confusion about what the expectations are for every single person's role. And that goes to the head coach, to the guys who are running the scout team for the offense and defense.
absolutely. Did you watch the Adam Brenneman episode with Tony Elliott talking about Tony flushing the toilets?
I just think that's great. And I think it's, you talk about the little things that matter, because then if he can trust those guys to flush the toilets before they head out to practice, then he knows that he can trust the offense, to go into overtime and win against Florida State or Louisville.
If
And
you
and
if you
those
did not play college football, you have no idea how often locker room cleanliness
Yes.
becomes an issue.
Well, and then it just becomes, the best part happens when Tony Elliott stops doing it, and it's the guys in the locker room, the players who are leading that example. And there,
Absolutely.
and like we would have guys who would walk around the locker room after everybody was done with practice and would take photos in the aisleways and be like, and take photos of people's lockers and be like, hey, so and so, this is unacceptable. This is not how we do things. This is not what we do to win. And it's, whether it was leaving your loop in your locker, not putting your stool up, not putting your shoes away, not putting your helmet on the drying rack. Those little things that people may just kind of roll their eyes and just be like, yeah, whatever, man. Like it ain't that deep. It really is that deep.
It
Because
is.
if I can trust you to clean your clothes and I'm sitting next to you and I know that your locker room isn't going to stink to high heaven, then I know I can trust you on outside zone when we have two guys slanting across two gaps and I know I can pass it off to you and I don't have to worry about it.
Absolutely. It's the little things. And obviously, Tony comes from a program of excellence at Clemson. Dabo is shouting out the success that Coach Elliott's had.
Yep.
And, obviously, hats off to Dabo. I played against Dabo, and, for as antiquated as some of his takes are, and bizarre the hills he dies on, that is a coach who genuinely sets a good example for his coaches,
Yeah.
cares a ton, and you can see that in the way that Coach Elliott coaches his guys.
Yeah, it's really encouraging. I think we've been talking for just the past 3 weeks about where this team was and now where it is right now, and just what the things they just have to keep stacking these weeks and keep stacking these days because obviously the expectations and the sky that they can reach, obviously is the limit for them.
Absolutely. And Chandler Morris, I think an underrated part of this, I think a lot of people know that that is Coach Chad Morris's son, and that Coach Morris had a relationship with Dabo and Coach Elliott. But Chandler, growing up in that building and growing up in those buildings where Coach Morris, Elliott, and Dabo have worked together, he knows that the processes are going to work. That imprints on you as a coach's kid when you're 11, 12 years old, and you see the way that guys take care of their business off the field, or the way they interact with the equipment managers or the trainers. And he's seen that lead to national championships. He's seen that lead to success. And obviously, he's been with some great staffs at uh, TCU in North Texas prior to this. So, he has a lot of experience being in those rooms. And I think having that at the quarterback position or any leadership position on the football field is super important.
Yeah, I had a chance to never got to play against Clemson, but I did get to go visit at the end of my junior year in 2017, obviously at the peak of Clemson football during their dynasty. And, right next to me as I'm walking into I got to go to the meeting room during one of the spring practices, and walking right in front of me is, current high school senior, but going to be a freshman, Trevor Lawrence.
Mm,
And, guys like that who were just a part of that program, who have now obviously you see what they can do on the NFL field. It speaks volumes to obviously just what a standard in a college environment, and how you can cultivate that and turn those guys into successful people, whether it's on the football field or areas outside of it. We've seen guys from the UVA program from, the 90s and 2000s now in their second phase of life or their third phase of life doing excellent things. The one example comes to mind, guys like Eugene Monroe
hmm
or DeBerkishaw Ferguson, who's now a nurse.
Yeah,
There's certain people who are just like they're born and bred and at UVA or other great programs, and that success and that strive for excellence, like I was just saying, it carries throughout the rest of your life.
absolutely. And obviously Virginia being a highly academic and character driven institute, that's something you need to get institutional buy-in. You need to
Yep.
be generating leaders of men and people that are going to be good stewards of their community, not just while they're on the grounds at the University of Virginia, but also when they go on to that next phase of life. And you can just see that in the way this team interacts with one another, that this team has that it factor.
Hmm. Absolutely.
James, we're almost running up on the time, so I'm going to send you a new link invite in just a second so we're not cut off mid-sentence.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Do you want me just to hang up and then resend a new one?
Yes, I'll send you a new one in just a second. Hang on. While we were on our brief intermission, James, Virginia released its uniform combination for this Saturday game against Washington State.
Hmm.
And we're throwing it back to 1990 because the throwbacks have been kind to us.
Oh, are we on orange jersey today or this
We're
week?
we're going orange jersey, we're going white helmet, no decal, just
Okay.
the asymmetrical blue and orange stripe,
Yeah.
as well as the white pants. We're not wearing the throwback orange jerseys, but we're wearing our current uniform set in the throwback configuration, which is one of my favorite Virginia uniforms. I love when we wear that.
We've had this conversation for probably, 18 years about the
Easily.
three of us and John arguing about what a UVA uniform would look like. I've actually in other programs and other football teams, I actually like a lot of different uniform combinations. UVA is not one of those schools. I have been a firm believer that they should only ever have white pants and only ever have a white jersey and a blue jersey. And those are
Ooh.
the two, and then you have the blue helmet. I do appreciate obviously the history of the orange jersey and then that white helmet with the orange decals. It's fine now, but there were a couple times in the mid 2000s where I would watch a UVA game and you would see orange jersey, orange pants, white helmet, and I thought it was one of the most disgusting things watching on television.
Anthony Calandria loved that uniform combination for whatever reason. It was now this cool thing. So you and I, obviously football coaches, kids, we Loved the mini helmets.
I had a couple of mini helmets that I just got shipped in from the mail here, but they're not UVA ones. I need to get a UVA one though.
So I think mom sent out the same set because obviously this has been a firm part of the 3-4-3 defense or 4-3-4 defense set for a while. Mom did send one of the UVA. This is probably hard to see on the call here, but that is the throwback, and it does have the two orange kind of Carolina Panthers stripes, which we grew up watching UVA wear. And so I'm assuming you want to go back to what like Heath Miller and Matt Schaub were wearing.
Would it be such an issue if we brought back the gray gloves, gray cleats, gray face mask? Would that be too ridiculous, too radical to ask either the ACC, UVA, somebody to bring this back, maybe just for 1 week. 1 week, can we bring back the gray gloves? That era, I know it's a nostalgia thing, but something about watching Heath Miller snag a ball with gray gloves or Chris Long do a pass rush with gray gloves, it meant something different, man.
A poster which I wish I had, and if there is a copy on the internet, I need to look on eBay after this. There's a picture of Wally Lundy with his full UVA uniform on, with the skull cap and his DJ headphones on, and he's like looking at the camera and like rapping into the microphone, and he's got the gray gloves on. That
I'll test.
poster,
I'll test your editing skills at this moment. If you find the picture and post editing, you'll put it over my face right now.
yes, this poster went so hard because like, and a lot of younger UVA fans not might not know who we're talking about. Like, I'm sure a lot of people know who Heath Miller is and who Matt Schaub is. So Wally Lundy is easily like top three my favorite UVA football players of all time. That poster will forever be a part of my UVA fandom.
Absolutely, the dude was one of them ones.
And I mean, he's right up there with Marcus Higgins. And like, one thing that I think is going to be interesting to watch with Virginia Tech transitioning to a new coach next year, with obviously Old Dominion on the rise in the Tidewater, I will be very interested to see if Virginia can start to make some inroads into the Tidewater that we haven't necessarily been able to make because for a long time, Virginia Tech has had that as a recruiting area for a very long time.
It's the next head coach for Virginia Tech will be a huge deciding factor into that. Obviously, the win, if UVA can pull out the win against Virginia Tech this fall, will also be a huge difference. And then, we'll have, James Madison and like you're saying, Old Dominion. There's three teams right now in Virginia who are playing great ball right now.
Yes.
Virginia Tech is not one of them, so this is a chance where those three teams can kind of come into that recruiting area and take over. So it will be interesting to see as we go along. There have obviously been some other big name firings that have happened in college football that it will ultimately see probably, in my opinion, UVA or Virginia Tech will probably be the first domino to fall in terms of who they announce as their head coach, in my opinion.
And you want to talk about a call an ambulance, but not for me moment in college football. If you asked every college football fan in America and got their opinion, who would last longer this year, Tony Elliott or James Franklin? I don't think there is a person outside of maybe Tony Elliott's next of kin that would have picked Tony Elliott to outlast James Franklin. And like, this is no shot at James because there are a lot of dynamics going on at Penn State that he didn't necessarily have control of. And look, like, all 11 guys on the field, or 22, depending on if you count offense, defense together, got to make plays. And like, you never want to root for anyone to get fired. But Tony Elliott was on a hot seat coming into this year.
It was highly discussed during the offseason about what was UVA going to do. And I mean, there was the last maybe 2 years, especially with Tony Bennett retiring with UVA basketball, there was this whole kind of weird atmosphere around UVA athletics about what was happening with the program, with the athletic director, with the president, about what type of direction they were going with.
Coach
And
O'Connor going to Mississippi State for baseball.
right. And so like there was just all this change, right? So then with all of that, and obviously UVA football obviously being in the spotlight of that, and Tony Elliott being right in the middle of that, you're thinking, okay, well, he's either, he has to be next, right? So it's obviously very surprising, how much this has turned around, and it's obviously how much it's changed the trajectory of UVA football and UVA athletics as a whole. Because obviously, as we all know, when a football program for a school of this size does well, a rising tide lifts all boats, and this will
Hmm.
obviously impact all the other programs as well. But as the thing for Penn State, I mean, last year I was at the game, the Big Ten game when they played against Oregon. They were overtime away from that, from winning the Big Ten, a couple plays away from winning for going to the national championship last year, and then 3 weeks ago were top five, top 10 team in college football. So it is crazy how obviously in this landscape, $50 million will kind of just is like, yeah, we're not phased by that. And
Whoosh.
yeah, just, light it on fire, burn it, whatever. $50 million, that's fine. And for those who know the buyout for James Franklin for him to get fired this year. So uh, it's definitely insane to see how much this is going to affect. And obviously, when you talk about things like private equity and revenue share and some of these other things, how much this is going to affect college football, I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of like a professional NHL or like European soccer where a coach has two bad games and then they're gone.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be reality just because more schools may have the ability to have those bankrolled buyouts be able to do that.
Absolutely. And speaking of the modern state of college football, I do want to point out a very positive thing with the
Okay,
transfer portal.
good. Let's hear it.
Virginia's quarterback last year, Anthony Calandria. Anthony Calandria, I was very fond of it during his time at the University of Virginia. I thought he brought a lot of swagger, a lot of moxie. He ended up transferring to UNLV. And with Coach Dan Mullen over there, the running Rebels are on fire. Calandria has played some awesome football at UNLV, and this is one of the situations where both sides of a transfer got exactly what they were looking for. Calandria is playing awesome ball in Las Vegas. Coach Mullen has a great quarterback there to use, and Tony Elliott was able to get Chandler Morrison to play quarterback, and obviously Virginia is number 18 in the country for a reason because Chandler Morris is playing awesome ball. Like, don't let the modern conception of where football is distract you that there are some really mutually beneficial moves. Like Anthony Calandria got the absolute most out of that transfer to UNLV, and both UNLV, Virginia, Chandler Morris, and Anthony Calandria benefited from it.
Yeah, I was actually watched some of the UNLV Air Force games. Shout out Coach Baycode at UNLV, the team I rep for in terms of military service academies in the FBS level. But yeah, that was an exciting game, and it's clear that how weird and dynamic UNLV football has had the last 2 years with Brennan Marion and Matthew Saluka, West NYCHSFL native himself, and now they've changed with Dan Mullen and Anthony Calandra. So it's interesting, and it's good to see that a transfer story like this work out. And like you're mentioning, I mean, I think both sides can't complain about how this is all shaken out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like you have a situation like Jaden Ott had transferring from California to Oklahoma, and it really hasn't worked out all that well. And Jaden Ott was an incredible player for Cal. And, but for every one of those, there is a situation where it works out very well. And to kind of go back to the actual football game that we have on Saturday, against a team that we both feel is highly competitive. They're fighting for bowl eligibility. They're revamping the Pac-12 with themselves and Oregon State. What do you think the keys to this game are going to be in order for the Cavs to beat the Cougs?
So I think the biggest thing is I think UVA has to control time of possession. I think they have to apparently, I was looking at some of the stats. UVA has really struggled in the red zone at times this season, and I think we have to be able to not throw away any chances during the game. Don't give Washington State any type of momentum, whether it's sudden change moment, whether it's a massive fatal MA or anything like that. Play the game that you want to play, dictate the terms, dictate the environment, make sure you get the crowd involved, and just be able to suffocate the team. I think the other thing that we've kind of mentioned, a big part of today was just about the offensive line. Like we mentioned, a lot of guys are coming back. It's important that all five guys, whoever they are on the field, are in complete synchronization. They're all working together towards one goal of just being a successful offensive lineman. And then I think the third thing is just, force Washington State early in the game to throw the ball, try to make them, get in those third and long situations, second and long situations where they can't just kind of get 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Hmm.
Force them to throw the ball, let the UVA secondary and those linebackers make plays and get that turnover margin where it needs to be for this game.
Absolutely. I think that dovetails into my three keys. The first one, usually I think about football from an offensive perspective, but I think getting Washington State's offense behind the sticks is going to be incredibly important. Allowing Cam Robinson and Daniel Rickert and Melton to get in a position where they can pin their ears back and rush the quarterback in a position where they can't just dink and dunk their way down the field. Number two, I think get Trell Harris going. Trell has had a quiet couple of games where the running game is dominated, or against Louisville, where Virginia just kind of got runs or got points through sheer force of will. This is a game where I think if we can get Trell Harris going in the mid passing game between that like 5 to 15 yard range, get him on some slants, get him on some digs, on some curls, I think that's going to be incredibly important. And then I think number three is just do not have any special teams miscues. One thing that I think Tony Elliott has done very, very well over his career and at the University of Virginia has been special teams. He's done an excellent job with special teams. Last year, this was one of the best special teams units in the country and has continued into this year. And it's largely been through avoiding those kind of WTF errors or those plays where you're just like, what is going on? Obviously, Will Bettridge is an awesome kicker. Eli Slybeck had the punt of the year last week against Louisville. And then Virginia's coverage units and return units have been very productive. And so I think continuing that, it's a chance for some momentum plays. We start the game off 7-0 because we made a great play on special teams. I think that is a key part to this game. And with that, James, do you have a score prediction for
So
Washington State at Virginia?
I just want to clarify. I think when we talked about, the Louisville game, I think I was or was it the Florida game? We were talking about the fact that I was the only one that called overtime,
You
and
were
I
the
got
only, and you were the closest one by far. Me and
and
John
I
had it by multiple scores.
I had a clown in the comments. Now this game's a little bit different. Wazzu is traveling across the country. UVA is coming off a bye. UVA, I believe, when I was checking the line, is about a 17.5 point favorite. I don't think it's going to be that big of a margin, but I do
Rat
think,
poison.
right, I do think UVA the score is going to be close, but I don't think when you watch the game, it's not going to seem as close. I'm thinking a 38-24 win for UVA.
I think this is one where we're a lot more in alignment. I think that we'll probably have a bit of a slower first quarter coming off the bye week. I think we'll need a chance to get back in rhythm. I do think we're going to be very close though on the final score. I'm predicting 31-17
Yeah.
UVA. I think we win, but we don't cover. I think a lot of people haven't had a chance to watch this Washington State team. I think a lot of people attributed last week to Ole Miss being sluggish and not Wazoo playing well. And for lack of a better word, it was both teams on that part. It was Wazoo playing well, and it was Ole Miss kind of coming off sluggish. And so I think this game is going to be incredibly important. Obviously, this secures bowl eligibility for the first time in the Tony Elliott era. Obviously, I think the majority of UVA fans have expected a little bit more of this season beyond just bowl eligibility as of now at 5-1. I think we're expecting a little bit more. I saw us projected at the Gator Bowl playing LSU, which as a Floridian, I would love UVA to go to a Florida Bowl, period. I would absolutely go to that game. But, I think that if we can secure bowl eligibility, lock this up, it's not an easy schedule by any means down the road. And so if we can take care of business uh, in this game, I think it'll be incredibly important for this Virginia team.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think keep an eye out for Washington State. Tony Freeman, the receiver, last game he had 9 catches for 92 yards. I think we kind of mentioned earlier, like Washington State's quarterback. I think he's good. I don't think he's incredibly great. He's not, super daring or anything like that, but he's someone that he's not going to force anything. So,
Yeah.
like we mentioned earlier, UVA has to get big stops on first and second down, make this guy throw the ball downfield, see what he can do, and let those UVA playmakers on the defense make big plays.
Absolutely. I mean, guys like Javon Provard, Antonio Clary, these guys are going to be incredibly important down the line for Virginia. And so I think if these guys can have a great confidence boosting day, obviously having played two very good quarterbacks in the last 2 weeks or last 3 weeks in Tommy Castellanos and Miller Moss, this is a chance for Virginia to make some plays. But Eckhouse, the quarterback for Wazoo, very, very solid quarterback. He's an FBS quarterback for a reason. And
Yep,
so I think that this is going to be a great test for the University of Virginia. This does not kill us if we do not, if things go sideways in terms of the ACC. However, this would be a very, very important momentum win. And I think that Tony Elliott and his staff and the players have approached this bye week with the right attitude to win the game.
absolutely. Yeah, you definitely want this win going into the rest of conference play. Obviously, coming off the bye, you want to make sure you just get all the cobwebs off of not playing for another week, and just look out there and go play sharp.
Absolutely. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This has been the 434 podcast. My name is Deuce Prince. James, you got something to
Last
say?
last thing before we head out, shout out to Zach Yarbrough, former UVA legend. He was on Good Morning America, I believe it was this morning,
Yes.
talking about his battle with breast cancer. Breast cancer. He's currently in stage 4 right now. Please go to his Instagram page, his social media. Click the links in his bio to support his No Bad Days project. Zach was an incredible older brother to us when we were kids and was one of our dad's favorites. Still is. And, he's just been someone that through all the adversity that he has faced through his life, as someone that's always had a smile, loves to fish, a big outdoors guy, and it is someone as a source of inspiration. That's something that is beyond the game of football. So just wanted to have that quick shout out there before we sign off.
Absolutely. And we wish Zach the absolute best of health and the best of luck in terms of this process. I mean, obviously, this is a very tight knit community in terms of the University of Virginia and Charlottesville. We look out for our own. And as a, I can assume, fairly male centric viewership, whether on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube or wherever, you were not less of a man for getting checked for these sorts of things. We saw D'Angelo recently passed away of cancer. And so, I think it is a important public service announcement to say that if you are a man, you are not less of a man for having these things get checked. And, as a man, your responsibility is to be there for the people that love you. And it's a lot easier when you are keeping up on your health. So, Zach,
Absolutely.
best of luck, everything
Yep.
like that. I mean, the world is better off with more Zach Yarboroughs.
Absolutely. So
So,
if you can go to his social medias, go show him some love there. And people who are UVA fans, remember, just make sure that everybody knows that he has a lot of people in his corner rooting for him.
absolutely. And with that important announcement, I do want to say that it is important. Go Who's, beat Washington State. Love you guys over in Wazoo, but I hope my Cavaliers win. This has been the 434 Defense Podcast. My name is Deuce Prince. That has been James Prince. Appreciate you. Like, subscribe, and have a great night.
See ya.